Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the AXR Sales Director Incubator, the program that helps you make great career decisions. My name is Mike Dixon, and I lead the sales and marketing practice for AXR Recruitment and Search. And today we have we have two guests on our show, Craig Wagner, the National Account Sales Director for Blackmores, and Dave Tuffin, Pharmacy Sales Director for Blackmores as well. Guys, how are you this morning?
Very well. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Good to have you on. Our first with two of you in the chair. Maybe just briefly explain. Both kind of sales directors for Blackmores. One national accounts, one pharmacy. What does that mean?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in, Mike. Look, I guess looking after the pharmacy channel for me, if you think about all those key pharmacy banners outside Chemist Warehouse, but you think about your Pricelines, Terry White's, all those key customers in that space. But in addition to that, I also look after our field team. So we're a direct model. We have a through-the-line field team that supports pharmacy. So I'm also responsible for that, as well as our customer service team. So it's a bit of a broad mix in terms of that remit, but yeah, covering all those key bases that I guess influence the pharmacy customer.
Perfect. Craig?
Yeah, look, from my point of view, it's I look after all the national accounts, right? So we are quite a diverse business. We've got a number of different brands in our portfolio, and they talk to different consumers and different shoppers. And so that's why there's kind of different skill sets between myself and Dave in regards to the pharmacy channel, and I look after the national account. So that's your Chemist Warehouse, Coles, and Woolworths, and then to the point of some of the online customers like your Amazons as well. So that is the bulk of our business with our Blackmores brand, but it touches on our Bioceuticals brand. So it's pretty much an even split across both Dave and myself from a commercial delivery, but totally different shoppers, different consumer outs, and offers that we need to take to those shoppers.
Interesting, great stuff. So before we kind of jump into a bit on career, I'll ask the same question to both of you, perhaps to you first, Dave. But so if you weren't a sales director, was there another path you could have taken?
Yeah, gee, you're taking me back now, Mike. But I guess growing up in WA, I always found myself and my head buried in the back of the newspaper, just absorbing sports content. So I had a real love of sports. Sure, I'm not on my own there. But and then when I graduated from uni, I had a communications degree. So what that was based around was very much PR and media. So you can think the love of writing, sports. I thought a natural progression there was going to be sports journalism. So at about the age of, would have been 19 or 20, actually, quite young, I thought I'll go for a cadetship at the West Australian newspaper over there. And I'll put it down to probably having a little bit too much fun, a little bit too much distraction at the time. But the career didn't quite take off. And I guess 20 years later, that's where I find myself in sales. And I guess I'm putting all that love of writing into crafting some great emails today.
Some poetry comes from Dave, that's for sure.
Awesome. Craig, what about you? What would you have done if you hadn't got into sales?
Yeah, I kind of fell into sales from a point of view. Like I started my career like packing shelves at the local Coles supermarket, right? And then just progressed through, sales reps, national account execs, and then to where I am today. And but if the dream came alive, I'd be a professional racing car driver, right? Like that's where the passion is. Like if I could do that again, and I'll hold on to that dream at the moment. But look, one of my passions is people, and I would probably be in sort of people and culture kind of area. Like I really do enjoy leading teams. I really enjoy watching people's career grows and providing them those opportunities, and that's one of my passions. And I would have fallen into probably people and culture, that's for sure.
Really? So do you watch a Netflix Drive to Survive? Is that on your list?
Constantly. There's my son and I have got bit nerd burglar, probably 400 or 500 Matchbox cars, right?
Oh wow!
Head out to Bathurst most years for the V8s and the 12-hour. So yeah, I love it.
Wow, fantastic!
And I drive a diesel station wagon, so that's quite funny, right?
So Dave, you live out your dreams crafting emails, and
yeah,
you have a diesel station wagon. Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. I love you talked there, Craig, about you started in retail, but I'm also always interested in the early stages of a career. There's often a particular role that can be, quite formative in terms of really kind of exciting and motivating you as to, yeah, I'm on the right path here. For you, Craig, was there a particular role you point to and you think that was the moment you felt, right, I'm in a good space?
Yeah, probably for me, Mike, it sounds a bit cliche, but with definitely the sales reps role. Like when I kind of, I did a cadetship with Coles and I was 21, I'd been there, on and off part-time and I'd gone full-time. And then I was lucky enough to run into the state manager for what was then, showing my age, National Foods, which is now Lion Dairy. And, I was lucky enough to be offered a sales rep's job, looking after pretty much northern New South Wales, including northern Sydney. So for me, just built a lot of skills around, like resilience, autonomy, that passion to keep going. The skills also around, that being able to deal with different people as well. So I was dealing with small, tiny little corner store guys that are buying 2 and 3 cartons of yogurt to, Woolworths at Neutral Bay, which was the biggest store at the time. So, those sort of skills, I'm a big believer that you gain a lot of experience and you learn from different roles. Sales repping for me was one. I'll be honest, I didn't enjoy it for the whole amount. Like I was a sales rep for about 2 years, and I think that was enough for me. And then I think, not super early in my career, I was probably post a national account manager role. I took on a sales strategy manager role at Treasury. That was probably one of the best roles I've ever had. That just really drove that strategic thinking, that enterprise-wide approach to what we're doing. And they're sort of two sort of early roles in my career that I really enjoyed. The skills of a rep, I'm a big foundational to me of landing that sort of skills around dealing with people, understanding how to adapt, deal with objections. That skill is something you take right through your career, whether it's internally influencing, whether it's with a major customer or you're dealing with a general manager and a retailer. Those skills will be there for you right throughout your career.
Yeah, I think that repping, I completely agree. A lot of people skip it, and it's a lot of it's tougher, I think, as well. If I think at grads coming in, it's often a great way to get to know the business, how the business really interacts with the customer. But and if you approach it a smart way, you really get a full idea of the business proposition. But there are fewer repping roles often around now, so it can be quite tough for people coming into the business to think, what's my entry point? And it's disappointing. I think that's the case. I mean, you still have a direct model, so you still got that opportunity, but not every business does anymore.
Yeah, and it's a tough one too there, Mike, that you do, you get grads coming through university, and I believe in that, right, to build your skill set, and they come out of university and they're like, right, I want to be whether it's category or an exec, a national account exec, or any other sort of roles across sales and marketing. And when you have the conversation of, I think you would really benefit, as a 20, 21-year-old, of spending 12 to 18 months on the road, dealing with grumpy store managers or whoever they are, and you'll learn these skills. It's actually tough to convince someone that is actually a right career skill building role that'll be foundational for you throughout your career. And I think a lot of people do underestimate it.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Dave, for you, was there a similarly a role that kind of transitioned your thinking and aligned you up to think, yeah, I'm on a good path here?
Yeah, you won't believe it. It was similar to Craig, which many will laugh at out there. But look, that rep role was formative, but I won't touch on that being that Craig's covered it. But I couldn't agree more. In terms of me coming in as a fresh graduate to Unilever, it was just Streets Ice Cream. That role really set the base. You talk about that skill bag that you build over your career. That rep role was the start point, and I bolted on as I've gone through. So I guess aligning with what Craig said there. But if I go to another role that was probably game-changing for me, was really that first people leader role. So actually one of your prior guests, Chris Bergen at the time, he was the head of the convenience channel at Frucor. And I was a national account manager reporting through, and the opportunity came up where he handed over the reins to myself. And that was quite daunting at the time. So that was would have been about 6 years into my career, handed the reins of the head of channel, 8 people I had to lead, our largest channel. And I was confronted with that real shift that I've heard other guests talk about, that juncture where you go from owning the functional remit of your role, you've got complete influence and control, You feel like you can really drive the agenda, to then sitting up a bit to a more holistic, with the weighting more towards that strategic level. And the struggle I had is I could see to myself that I was getting in the way of the team. I was too much in the details still. I was still wanting to control and influence too much. And I had that, I guess, a bit of an awakening at the time, where I suppose it was the first time in my career I started learning a lot of those softer skills that I find so important now, that emotional intelligence coming through around actually being a bit vulnerable. So I actually sat with the team and said, look, what is it that you are looking for in a leader? What are the key skills that I can support you with that I guess really enable you to be strong in the face of the customer? What are the barriers internally that I can help remove that are going to allow you to really excel in your role? And obviously by going through that process, I mean, it sounds like quite simple philosophy, but by doing that, we built a really clear roadmap, I guess, together as a team. That was where I understood how you could build trust quite early, delivering some quick wins for them. And I guess from there as well, what it meant is it gave me a clear game plan to work against, so I could actually measure my own success against those goals. So that role was really important for me, I guess, of me getting a stronger understanding of what leading is versus actually being in the detail of the role, and probably struggling to transition. So I've taken that forward.
Yeah, great. And sometimes when you're plotting your career, Dave, that there's easy and just tough decisions to make. Perhaps talk to me about when you've kind of thought, well, this is a no-brainer, I'm going to do this. And sometimes contrast that with perhaps a much more tougher situation you've had to kind of face into around, what do I do here?
Yeah, look, the easy decisions, Mike, are those where if you're having open and regular, transparent conversations in a strong culture in an organisation, you'll be getting that regular dialogue and feedback about where you're placed in that talent map, where your career is, a path is leading. And you should be having those discussions so that by the time they arrive, it's really just a natural transition. They're things that you're prepared for, you've been working against, and they're clear goals. I think some of the best advice I got early in my career, and this one was really good in terms of those tougher decisions, was I was told, take the title off the role. And the person at the time, the mentor, said, look, what I want you to do, and I actually did this, I literally wrote it down on a bit of paper. He said, I want you to write down the experiences you want. I want you to write down what you're passionate about. And I want you to write down your development goals. And every sort of couple of years, you might update it. And I've done that. And obviously what it does is the title is very much like pigeonholing your view. You get very centric on a vertical climb, or that must be the next role. And what it did for me is it broadened the vision to go, well, what are the lateral experiences that go across multiple areas of the business? And going to your point of those tough decisions then, they're the ones that sneak up on you when you haven't actually done that preparation about thinking a bit more laterally. And so for me, whilst they were tough, I would always fall back on that checklist to go, well, how does it line up against some of these experiences? So I had one where it was moving from that head of channel role where I was on the sales leadership team to really going backwards, if we looked at it that way, to do a state manager role at the time. But it ticked the boxes of, I wanted to get a lot more around the operational side of the business. I wanted to get to the nuts and bolts of how a business runs. So that decision, whilst tough at the beginning, became quite easy because I could see the path it was going to navigate me to.
That's great advice, actually, because I think often we do get very fixated on the title, and you do naturally make assumptions based on that, as opposed to what your mentor described to you, which was taking that away and actually looking more at the experiences. Greg, do you approach it differently? Do you have a different way of kind of looking at those, those tougher decisions possibly around career?
Similar to Dave, but I think it's also about, from my point of view, it's about breadth of experience. I had a similar experience when Dave and I, it's scary, our careers are very similar. So is our dress sense, right? And it's a brother from another mother. But mine was early in I say early in my career, I was in sort of my early 30s, and I'll say his name, a guy by the name of Craig Tompkins, who was one of my, and still one of my mentors, right? I speak to him regularly. When I was at Treasury Wines, like I was just headstrong. I had blinkers on. I was aiming for sales director, right? That's what I wanted. That was my passion. That's just where I wanted that leadership. And I was head of EDG, or head of the Endeavour Drinks Group business. Big team, big remit, big revenue for the business. And an opportunity came up to move into what was a new division, which was the sales strategy division. And I remember, Craig and I sat down and spoke, and he said, "Look, we'd love you to come across." And I was like, "No, I'm in sales." And he sat me down at that point. He said, "Can I give you some advice?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." He said, "You won't get it." I said, what do you mean I'm not going to get? Surely I'm going to get the sales director's role. Like, that's what I'm after. I'm passionate, I'm driving, I'm doing the right things. He said, you don't have the breadth of experience. He said, you've been too linear in your career. You've been national account exec, national account manager, senior national account manager, business manager, head of customer. And he said, you need breadth of experience. You need to prove broader enterprise-wide thinking. You need to have your strategic thinking agenda. That's where those skill sets need to be developed, because when you come up one linear line, it's a challenge. And I kind of sat back and left that meeting going, nah, he's wrong. And I kind of sat back that night and thought, actually, he's right. I need that breadth of experience. And I think, when you do map out your career, you need to have that breadth of experience. It's like the tree, right? You got the trunk, and you've got those branches off there of experience, of strategy and thinking. And I had another one about 5 years later, when I left that sales strategy role after, sort of 3 or 4, it was about 4 years. I went into a state-based role looking after state-based accounts, right? So I've gone from head of our biggest customer sales strategy into looking after key accounts for New South Wales. And everyone's like, what are you doing? And I said, well, I don't have big team experience. Like, I've always worked in national account teams. I've got maximum team of about sort of 10, where we had 42 reps, 6 key account managers, operations, like big team. I needed to work in that environment where there was a big breadth of team and also diversity of thinking. So like when you're running a national account, you kind of know what's going on, when it happened, why it happened, how it happened, and what am I doing about it, right? You've got data. Where here you're working with on-premise, you're working with independent retailers, you're working with national accounts. So it gave me that kind of breadth of experience. And that was another one where I sort of sat back in my career and went, a lot of people think, why am I doing this? But it was to build that skill set, to build that diversity of thinking, to build that, that experience and learn points. So yeah, they're two for me that were really, really key points. And to Dave's point, if you've got a clear development plan and you're working on it and you've got a good mentor, honesty is key to that. And that was what Craig gave me at the time. He said, you're not going to get it. And it was probably the best advice that I've ever had, which is what, kind of 10 years ago now.
Hi there. I'm sorry. It looks like we have lost Mike. I'm really sorry. Now the next part of, we were going to discuss your advice in terms of insights as a sales director. Now, David, I think one of the things you were speaking about was the big step that you took in as your first sales director role. Do you want to give us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, thanks, Hazel. Look, I think it was about really what's this, how big a step is it into that sales director role is often a common question. And I think for me, the size of the step is really, I guess, aligned to the work we've done leading in. It sounds obvious, but we've talked a lot about breadth there. So if you think about when I made that change in my career, it was really 17 years in. And I guess by that stage, I'd done a number of roles across different functions, across different disciplines. And I talked earlier about building that kit bag of skills, I guess. And by the time I was ready to make that move into the sales director role, it actually felt like a more seamless transition. But if you had have asked me, I guess, 5 years earlier, there was still a lot that I needed to learn in regards to, if we're talking Blackmores, needing to understand the education components of the business. I didn't have that was a new sector for me coming from FMCG into health. So I need to invest the time to actually understand, well, how does that part of the business actually run? Obviously getting across broader departments to really understand where I needed to influence to get the results that I needed to deliver. So I guess for me, the sales director role, whilst as a title sounds quite big, it's more about the collection of things that sit within it that I guess for me, the way I feel in terms of being prepared for that change is about checking my readiness. And when I talk readiness, I'm big on loyalty in a role. And so if I touch on what I mean by that, if you look over my career, I've generally spent at least 2 to 3 years in every single role I've been in. And most companies, I've now been at Unilever 5 years. I was at Frucor for 8 and Blackmores now coming up to 7. And the reason I talk about loyalty linked to readiness is, for me, that first year in a role is all about getting a little bit of your style and tone in terms of what you're going to deliver. The second year is really putting that scaffolding and framework around the strategy and watching it come to fruition. And then that third year for me is really seeing the fruits of your labor and the reward come through. And I'm a big believer that by committing yourself to that sort of time frame, you're getting good feedback, you should be, from your line manager around your competencies, around your performance. You're also getting to see actually the just results of what you've actually implemented. I think anything earlier than that, it's hard to get a read on how ready or how much you've achieved. So generally, to guess going all the way back to the start of that question is, I always feel if I get to the end of that point, I can stand back with hand on heart and go, well, I have achieved, I have delivered on the remit in front of me. And when you get to that point and you get that sense of achievement, it obviously builds that adrenaline around momentum. So by the time you're moving to the next role, it's not feeling like you've jumped in one role for a year here or there and then gone to the next. And am I really prepared? You're actually going, I've committed myself, I've delivered, I feel like I'm on top of where I need to be. I'm now ready to make that next jump. So within all that, hopefully you get a sense, I guess, in terms of that commitment piece being really important, as well as, I guess, the collection of skills, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I'd agree, Dave. I think there's what I'm seeing is that I use the word caring as well. Like, you got to care for what you're doing and the role that you're in, and be the best rep you can be the best national account exec you can be. I know that sounds really cliche, but to have that commitment when you do go into a role is, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 years here, whichever it might be, honing my skills and being the best NAM that I can possibly be. And a lot of times I'm having conversations with people around, okay, I'm going to do this role and then that role and then that role. And they're thinking 2 and 3 ahead. It's great to have that career path of, where your journey is. But if you're being a Woolies NAM for the first time, or you're taking on a national account exec role, yeah, sure, you want to take that next role, but be the best of what you can be in that role. Take on more responsibility when you've got your foundations right, and grow your learn and experience. I think that's what we need to drive a lot more with, career growth. Is every role is a learn point. Every role is an experience builder. It's not a stepping stone. And I think there's a lot of conversations at the moment, right? Cool, I'll do this for 12 months and then I'll move on to something else. All you're doing is caretaking a role for 12 months, in my opinion. You're not developing the role. You're not taking it to the next level. You're not evolving yourself and the role and the business at the time. So for me, it's about coming into that in caring. Coming back to the question, Hazel, in regards to the sales director role, I agree with Dave. I think that it prepares you for it, and I think experience is a very powerful thing in preparation for the next step. But for me, it was a big step. Like, it was a big change, and the reason why I say that is because I probably underestimated the breadth of impact on total enterprise. So when you're in sales, right, you've got a commercial number, you've got your team, you're delivering against your strategic agenda with our customers, you're bringing your brands to life in store, delivering the number every month. But when you do go into you sit on the LT, you report into a managing director, or you report into a regional head. You're talking about people agenda, you're talking about vision of the organisation, you're talking about how you operate as a business, you're talking about 2-3 year out agenda around the consumer, product development. You're involved in more than just sales, and that's probably the biggest initial challenge of, I've got my core role and number to deliver and leadership through my team and their development. But I'm also involved in a marketing agenda. I'm also involved in a HR agenda, in a logistics, supply, long-term planning. Like, those are all influences that need that decision-making collectively across a tight leadership team. So it is a big step up, because you are talking about total enterprise. You are involved in the total delivery of the business versus your patch. And that if without the experience, can be an enormous leap. But that's one of the big things about getting onto a leadership team, not just an SLT, but a full leadership team of organisation. Your enterprise thinking has to be incredibly strong, and that resilience definitely comes through.
Great. I'm back, guys.
He's back.
Disappeared for a moment there, but I noticed
you missed the poetry.
Yeah, did I really? I'm sure it was well crafted. Now, I see we've obviously got some technical challenge. I think Dave's now unmuted as well, so maybe he jumped in and out. He's muted, so he jumped in and out of the connection. But maybe there's some challenges with the internet this morning, but I was enjoying listening to the conversation. That was really interesting, guys. I heard the last couple of minutes of that. So that was great. So you were chatting there about the shift to sales director and the breadth of role there, which is interesting. And because we talked a lot about that through other sessions too, this linear path is never going to be enough. You have to ensure that you have enough experience to have that enterprise-wide view, which you talk about. But there's lots of ways in which you do build experience. I think one of the key ways about doing that is ensuring that you build your network too. And I think it's very easy to kind of sit within your lane because you're busy in your job, and we're all kind of asked to do a lot in terms of delivering today. But that network gives you perspective and too. I'd love to get your take on that. We'll jump back to Dave because I think he's unmuted now. But Dave, from your perspective, how do you build a network when you are busy in a day job?
Yeah, look, Mike, maybe if I touch on I'm quite passionate about that internal network as much as the external. So on the internal one, sometimes if we talk about building profile, because I think they work hand in hand, sometimes these two things, it can be a bit cheesy, right? We're going to handball you this, give you a project to build your profile. Yep. But I'm a big believer in this, that if done well and build that internal network around it, it can be really powerful in terms of how you move through organizations and your career. So if I reference when I managed the state manager team, and the reason I use that role is because often those roles that are disconnected from head office are the hardest ones to build your network and your profile. And you can choose to go one or two ways. You can choose to build your empire external to the office, or you can bring yourself in and really galvanize a network of support around your state. And that for me is a symbol of where I've always seen internal networking is so important, because I've seen it work really well. And what my advice is to teams that I've had is, consider if you are managing a state, it's like a business within a business. Your job's to get that organization to come into your backyard and support you around your agenda and your remit of what you need to deliver. And by doing that, obviously, you need to reach out. You need to be proactive. You need to be initiating the drive with those internal stakeholders to get them to support the plan. So that means touching base with category, connecting with marketing, working with the heads of channels. And when I've seen that really occur, that internal side of getting across departments and organisations, I've had great examples of those state managers moving on to much bigger and better roles in line with just thinking about ways of driving the remit versus waiting to be fed. So for me, that internal network, it's always been important. From the day I was a rep to a NAM, I always felt it was a differentiator. There were some that thought by just sticking to their lane and being a leader within their lane, that would be enough. I've always encouraged, I guess, within myself and my own team, when you've hit your stride in your role, the real game changer is moving beyond being a functional leader to being a broader business leader. And that means identifying opportunities that sit outside just your direct lane and going, I see an opportunity over there. It's not directly linked to me, but I've got the capacity I've freed up now. I'm going to actually go and chase that down. And so, yeah, I think there's many different ways you can do it, but I do feel it really helps fuel your career growth if you do the right things in that space.
Great. It does talk to a question in the chat from Daniel Roberts, who compliments you both on great content, particularly when Mike wasn't around. At times there's a real challenge between balancing being on the business versus in the business. And it's kind of the same thing you're talking about there, Dave, and he asked about tips or no-goes. So from your perspective, it's about, yes, nailing the role first of all, but then the game changer is thinking beyond that. Craig, have you got a different perspective around being on and in the business, and is that to do with networking as well?
Yeah, I think I'll touch on networking here, Mike, and I agree with what Dave has said. I also take an approach that if you get to know people in the organisation at a deeper level without being sort of too cheesy, right? I think there's a great ability to build your network across the organisation. So, getting beyond the whole, how was your weekend? And that's pretty easy at the moment. How was your weekend? I went for a walk and then I had a beer, and then I woke up the next day, I went for a walk, I had a beer, and here I am on Monday again, right? Is getting to actually understand more people in the business. So, the kids and all that kind of stuff, and getting to really know, like, I'm a social person, so I love that, right? And for some people that's easy, some people it's hard. But when you do have that, you build a broader network of people across the organisation because you know them beyond just, what they did on the weekend. And I think that's really important, that you get that deeper understanding of the team, and you can do that with your customers as well. Like, I think that's really key. so for me, that's it. I think Dave talked about it around, like the development opportunity, right? Around taking on additional roles. I've had plenty of experiences across my career. I had one probably only 2 years ago when I took on the export division for Australia, or out of Australia within the organisation. You experience different people across the, in Asia, in China, in other markets here. It gives you that breadth of experience and start to know broader people across the organisation. And I think, taking on those extra opportunities, I think, I've got one member of my team, or new member of my team now, who was head of our SLC, so our, staff liaison committee, right? Or getting involved in something that we just set up across the business, or sort of actually re-engineered it during COVID, which is our culture club, right? So again, you get involved in, it might not be direct career opportunities of, hey, I'm taking on a bigger customer, or hey, I'm actually doing something else. Some of those other opportunities that you get breadth of experience of, talking to people in our advisory team, or talking that I would not normally talk to, or talking to people in our export or our China team or our Indonesian team. You get that exposure across the organisation, and that is, it does build your profile. I think as well is that socially, LinkedIn is a really great example. I'm honestly shithouse at it, so it's not one of my strengths, right? But I think that profile around being visible across platforms, particularly in this current environment. I'm sitting here in the lounge room surrounded by the kids' toys and those sorts of things. And hard to obviously build your network, but even at the moment, I'm still reaching out to ex-colleagues, just making a point to sort of keep those networks and talk to the people that I enjoyed working with, and just checking in with them around just how they're going. Right, a number of them are in Melbourne. I've worked for a lot of businesses that had head offices in Melbourne, and that's been 230 or 240 days of lockdown, whatever it is the world's strictest or longest. Just making that time to check out, and it sounds simple, but it's usually difficult, because you do get to the end of the day, it's 6 o'clock, you've had a frantic day, and you think, oh, I haven't called that person this week, but I'll put it on my to-do list on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's interesting. It's evolved over lockdown. I've noticed it's become not just business content, and it's kind of blending a little bit work and life, and because that's what we are right now, isn't it? And,
100%, definitely.
So people are actually sharing a bit more about themselves, and you can actually start to see relationships developing that aren't just very, very kind of work orientated, which I like. It's funny, whenever I post something on LinkedIn about I went for a run today, it gets more likes and views and comments than a great piece of content on a piece of thought leadership poetry I've written. Nobody's quite as interested in that. But there's Mike's dog. Oh, great.
It kind of builds to that though, Mike, around being like, when you network, it's about being who you are, right? It's about being authentic, and I'm going out for a run, and it kind of builds as well for me, particularly at the moment, is around balance. So like I've got a spare hour in the middle of the day, I'm going to go for a run. You know what I mean? Like I've been on calls from 7:30, and that's my time. And if you share that openly, it's about who you are as well.
I think I think that's what it is. It's people are sharing more. There's more authenticity, and that's a word that's thrown around a lot. But when people start to kind of let you inside their life a little bit, you feel you do get to know them a bit more.
Definitely.
You might reach out and engage more. So I think it's because what else can we do right now?
100%, 100%.
Cool. I want to jump on to the time we've got left, just talking a bit about the role of the sales director. We get a lot of feedback and questions come in to say that we love that section. People want to understand more about what it is you do, because there's often a view looking at the role thinking, well, I interact with my sales director, but I'd love to see it from his or her perspective. Perhaps let's start with customers. Now, I'm interested in both of your views on this, but what role do you think the sales director plays with the customer? Maybe start with you, Dave, and we'll come back to you, Craig.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mike. Look, I think at the end of the day, when it comes to the sales director role, I mean, it's really an extension, as I said, from, I guess, when you've been a national account manager and you're more in the operational thrust, as you move into that director role and you're meeting with customers, you really want to have that clear agenda going in with working with your team of understanding what are the needs of the customer? What are your needs in terms of the team member in regards to the best role I can play to support you in that interaction? So look, there's many things obviously we can do to help influence and, as I mentioned earlier, remove barriers to support, whether it be the customer or the internal team member. But it really comes down to that relationship, both with the person that's working with you, as well as your understanding, as I say, about what that customer's KPIs are and what they're trying to achieve. So whenever I'm going to a meeting with a customer, whether it's a top to top or so forth, the most important time I spend is up front, just sitting down with the team to go, well, talk to me a little bit about where we are in the journey, where are we up to in regards to the JBP in terms of, I guess, outputs. But they probably spend the most time then on what do you need my help with? Where am I going to add maximum value for you? I don't want to go in there and just be the person who comes in and undermines an agenda that's really important to you. I also don't want to steer it in a direction where you're in control of this customer. You're having the daily interactions. My job's just to facilitate and support and lead, but I want to make sure that person feels empowered, that nothing changes in that dynamic as I enter the room. I am simply there to be that extra layer of support for them to help them be better with that customer. And so that's always front and center in my mind for any role that I play, I guess, in terms of going out for some of those key meetings. Sometimes they're built to be a bit, I think, mythed up in terms of what goes on in there. And look, there'll always be sometimes those more confronting meetings. But again, I never think there should be surprises. You should always be going into those forums with a very clear understanding of what you're facing into and how you're going to collaborate to deliver it together.
Great. Craig, and thanks for that, Dave. Craig, your view on that?
Yeah, it's very similar, funnily enough, but I think it's also a role that, what role do we play in delivering against the agenda and the vision of what we're trying to achieve, right? So I think, from a sales director's point of view, we need to have, the vision of what we're wanting to achieve for the year and actually how and the standards that we want to achieve with it. So from my point of view, it's definitely around, how we're delivering the number. And what will come afterwards, right? The number will be the number, right? But if we're operating the right way, we're well planned, and getting those standards in place, so that operating standards is definitely a key part of the role, so that everybody knows what they're a key part of. And I think that's come about, from the director role of leading the team. I'm a big believer that team before me, right? So making sure that those team standards are there and everyone's clear on what roles they need to play is definitely key. Like with the customer directly, I think that this role has a key role to play, right? I think I've seen plenty of sales directors out there that see their customers once every 6 months, right? And you go, how is that supporting the team? How is that delivering against the vision if the customer sees you once every 6 months for 45 minutes, right? But I think there's a role to play around, to Dave's point, to support the team and to know exactly what we're delivering against. And then my role is to deliver against that when in the good times and in the tough times as well. But it's about being consistent too. I've been in a number of situations in a number of roles where you go in and you're delivering against an agenda and you're having tough conversations, as we all have with Coles and Woolies, right? That's part of the role. And then you get the sales director walks in and goes, "Oh yeah, we just agreed to that." You're like, "I just spent 18 months. What do you mean you've just hang on a second?" And nothing more, motivating, crushing than that. So I think, from this role, it's definitely about consistency with the customer. So we're on this agenda. This is what we're delivering against. We know what your agenda is. We know what our agenda is. Some of them are going to clash. Some of them are going to align. That's fine. But being in there to support the team so that they know that they've got full support behind them when they're going in for tough conversations. That's one really powerful one for me, that we've made some strategic decisions around our export supply. But I hope that my team that went through that knew that they had the full support, that I was in there having the same conversations. We weren't going to move. This was a move that it was going to happen. And so they feel that support. So that's a one big thing for me around with customers. It's about the consistency delivery against the agenda versus chopping and changing.
Yeah, great. I'd love to get both of your views as we kind of move towards the close of the session. But you talked there about you've seen sales directors through your career perhaps not be in front of customers as much as you think they should be. But if you were to distill it down to, the three things that sales directors must bring, must do. It's a core trait of being a good in that role. Now, reflecting about those you've worked alongside, what you tried to work to yourself, Craig, what are the three things that you would pin as the most important?
Firstly, is consistency for me. I think it sounds a bit boring, right? And I believe it's an underrated trait. Is consistency. So good news, bad news, treated the same way. The team know exactly what they're going to get from me, not today versus Jekyll and Hyde kind of style of highs and lows of someone, right? So you're getting that consistency. Trust as well. Trust in the team, trust in the strategy, trust in what we're going to do, and that people are doing the right thing. Like that is a big one for me. So you have that consistency, you have that trust. And the second one for me is just around strategy or vision, right? So that we know where we're heading. A trait that sort of can ground the team back to, this is what we're on this path. Yes, there might be some a little bit of meandering along the way. That's normal business. No, but we're not getting to the tennis section turning left or right. Where that's the path that we're on. So for me, having that vision and having that opportunity to sort of regularly. And you need to be disciplined in this and regularly finding the time every, whatever the right time frame is to sit back and go, are we still on track? Are we off track? Where do we need to be? Is this still the right agenda? Let's just double check in on it. So that for me around consistency, trust, and having a clear vision of what we're trying to achieve is really critical traits for me.
Great. Consistency, trust, and vision. Dave, I know you guys are quite aligned, but
no, I've got some different ones.
As consistent?
No, it's
got
not
early days.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Yeah, I've got some different ones, but look, I think for me, EQ and IQ, emotional intelligence, I touched on it earlier in my career. I just think is so important, and probably has become, you could argue, over the last few years, even more important. That whole connection, compassion, care. We talk a little bit about mental health, but not just so much linked to that. Just in general leadership today, what I really love actually is words like humility, vulnerability. These softer skills that might have been frowned upon 10 years ago now are really part of the core of what we see as a true leader in a business. And I really like that. For me, they're so important to have the balance. I'm a big believer that if you get the how right, if you build the trust of the team through doing those soft skills well, the scoreboard will look after itself.
Yeah.
I know we're in sales. I know we're at the pointy end and the scoreboard's important. But I think if you stand there staring at it all day, it's not going to change. You've got to really get yourself invested in the how with your team. And they're not skills that come straight away. You've got to keep working those muscles throughout your career. But for me, that's a really important one. The other one that you might have caught a thread on throughout is influencing. So whether it's tied back to the networking bit or the profiling or anything else, once you get to the sales director role, I think Craig touched on it well with the customer piece. You have to have an ability to be able to influence, but not through an inauthentic way. It has to be done through a way that people generally connect with you. They get you, they respect you, they see you as reliable, trustworthy, and someone they actually want to engage with. And I've always prided myself that I've built that internal network to be able to achieve that. And that's enabled me to deliver success, whether it be with my team or customers. So I think that's a really important one. And the third one is the ability to challenge and inspire growth for me. And I tie the word respect to that. You can challenge in a way that's non-respectful. To me, that doesn't get you the outcome. Yeah, as sales directors, if you tie it back to your question before, we need to be able to build a vision and inspire people towards that vision by challenging them. And I've heard you talk on other chats, Mike, about positive tension. I've used that word a bit about whether it's tension or agitation, but it's a good thing to have, because to me, it's where the magic happens in regards to unlocking those right conversations that really drive change within teams. So they'd be the big three for me.
Yeah, great. I think for anybody listening to the podcast or listening to on the live call today, often when I'm interviewing somebody, I talk about their journey, their development journey, and we talk about their strengths and what they're working on in terms of trying to get better. And people often go to really technical things. And you've not taught anything there, either of you, about technical skills. It's about enabling you and others to be around you to be better. Everything's about the soft skills there across the 6 points we just mentioned. And it's amazing when I interview people, they go to the technical side straight away.
Yeah.
And I'm not really that interested
No.
in the technical piece. You know, it is those softer skills that actually I'm really looking for, that self-awareness of someone's understanding of what they bring and what they're good at, but what they need to work on as well. And I want to just finish on maybe taking that into I guess that kind of assessment process that you've both been involved in lots. But so when you are looking for a candidate for a role, and it could be internally through the talent pool or externally, what do candidates do that really impress you both when they are able to take it to that next level? What is it they do?
I'm happy to jump in, Mike. I think for me, preparation is key, right?
Yeah.
I've had candidates walk through the door that have shopped in the channels over the last 3 weeks before coming into the interview, just to get a sense of the channel dynamics. What's happening in store? What's the execution look like? What's the product placement and branding? What are the opportunities I can see? They've gone and transacted in different channels to see what's the interaction like in terms of the service, what's happening and playing out in terms of what I can see around the delivery model in store, as I say. So that preparation is key, because to your point, Mike, anyone can bring in a CV with a list of skills. And look, obviously, you know, we're built differently as leaders, but to your point, I'm built in a way that I can read the black and white. That's great. It's on the page and wonderful. I'll probably spend more time of that interview pressure testing, wanting to know a little bit more about the how I reference the softer skills, because they're things for me that you can't just write down black and white. You've got to talk from the heart. You've got to be authentic about how have you built those muscles over your career. Give me examples of how they've played out. And that to me is when you bring actually the story off the page of the CV versus just saying we've hit a number.
Yep.
And the final bit I'd say is, one question I often ask that I get a bit of a wishy-washy answer to is, talk to me about your current development plan that you've got in place with your line manager. And the wishy-washy answer I might get is that talk about them working on their next job, or it'll be just a little bit diluted around what I'm wanting to hear there is real honesty around what competencies are you currently working on to make yourself better in your current role and moving into your future. And to me, by being honest on that question and being authentic, it builds that early trust in the interview that I think, great, everyone's got something to work on. I want to hear that. So they're two really important ones for me that impress.
Great. Finally, Craig, anything to add to that?
I want to reiterate the research big time. Like, that is impressive when someone spends the time to come in. It doesn't matter about any role, that knows our business. Like, we're you know, I've worked for plenty of publicly listed ASX listed companies. Like, skim the annual report, right? Understand what the business is going at. And nothing more kind of concerning when someone comes in and they ask about the business and you go, okay, cool. So we've got the Blackmores brand and the Bioceuticals brand. It's like, oh, Bioceuticals, is that yours, is it? So we're two big pillars in our portfolio, right? And you kind of not across that. And so that, for me, research on the organisation is absolutely key. And I think I want to reiterate what Dave said around like the EQ part is, yeah, great, I can read your CV that says you're a national account manager and you delivered 4% growth and you did this. But I'd rather be hearing from someone that in the role of that I, you know, built this relationship with the customer, I built my resilience, I changed the forward plan of the agenda, I implemented a strategy, a JVP. You know, I delivered against those kind of skills as well, and I built my resilience. I've built experience across supply planning and VRPing and all those other experiences. Yeah, sure, the 3% growth or the 30% growth is great, right? But the skills and the experiences that you gained out of that role and why you did that role, I think are really important that someone can demonstrate from an EQ and what they bring, as you said, Mike. Like, what do they bring to the role? Are they a transformation style person? Are they someone who's going to turn the business around or the accounts around? Are they someone who's going to take it from 8 out of 10 to 10 out of 10? You know, those are the sort of skills that we want to, that I look for, and breadth of experience, that sort of breadth of, you know, personal EQ and experience versus just everyone can read a CV with numbers and achievements on it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's I think too often people focus on the results of what they've done and they're very proud of those achievements, but actually results. It's the process and what you learned along the way that is critical. But guys, we're out of time. We're run over slightly, so thanks for bearing with us, everybody, for being a bit late today and some of the technical issues we had along the way. But I love that when I jumped back in, it was almost I wasn't needed. You guys were having a great chat, so that was going really well. So thanks, Craig and Dave, for sharing your journey. Really interesting to get. That's all right. Your perspectives on how you work, I guess both independently in quite different roles, but you're clearly very aligned as well, and come across as a very team orientated. So really interesting to kind of get that dynamic. As a reminder, everybody, today's session will be in the podcast, Your Future in Sales and Marketing. Next Thursday it will land. Download and subscribe in your favorite podcast provider, Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our next live session is a marketing director incubator. October 7th, we have Gerard Smith, who's the new CMO of Freedom Foods. A lot to talk about there. We've also got a bonus pod, which will be landing in, I think, a couple of weeks' time with Rich Curtis, who's the CEO of the marketing agency Future Brand. So that was a non-live session, but just for pod only coming up. The next live sales director incubator is into October 21st. We've got Chris Shaw from Diageo coming on. So we've got loads of career insights and highlights and views from the top to talk about over the next month or two. Thanks again, Craig and Dave. That was awesome, guys. And thanks for everybody for your patience. Stay safe, and we'll talk again soon.
Have a good day, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, have a good day. Thanks, guys.